let's talk about the pro wrestling territories. People kind of wonder, where did the territories all get started? Well, actually, it got started by the Gold Dust Trio. That was they really came up with tag team matches, return matches, being disqualified, rules. They came up with all that. So they were the first people who actually hired wrestlers to wrestle for them full time, where they could do return matches, and they really created professional wrestling and created the territory, because they would run that. Hey, by the way, Mike said that is true. That's his name. You got it. So that's true. But that was the thing about, that's where it started. But now when it really got to be a organized deal was when the National Wrestling Alliance started. When that began, territories took off, and there was like 45 different NWA territories at the time when it first started, and this was in the 1940s. When you look at the guys that were in the territories, I think that Eddie Graham's Championship Wrestling from Florida, Cowboy Luther was the guy that he bought it from. Eddie Graham, and I'll bring this to Rodney, he was probably one of the smartest promoters ever in professional wrestling. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And anybody that needed a finish, anybody that needed someone to take a look at what's going on, see what's not drawing, why we're not drawing, they always went to Eddie Graham. Always went to Eddie Graham. Then later on, Bill Watts became the fixer. If you had a problem, send him to 6 weeks of show. He'll fix your TV, and then you can go for 6 weeks, 3 months after he gets finished fixing what you messed up.
Jack, Championship Wrestling from Florida, it kind of set the standards for wrestlers. They would go there and learn from Eddie Graham, and Hiro Masuda would also train them as well. But when they would, by the time they left Florida, if they left Florida, Steve Kern left Florida, he went to Georgia or he went somewhere, he was ready to wrestle for the rest of the territories.
Yeah, that was a proven ground for a lot of guys. I mean, the money was good. They expected a lot out of you, so you earned your money there. But they wanted you to learn. They weren't in the business of running guys out. They just wanted to get the best out of you. So, you're in Florida, so guys love being in Florida. You get that beach time, but you also get to sit under that learning tree and get good at your craft, so that when you left Florida, you could go anywhere.
And Eddie Graham was we talk about finishing. Eddie Graham, he had the step by step. Some finishes, as Dusty Rhodes said one time, you had to have a roadmap to know how to get there. That's how, and if you messed up one little thing, and Eddie Graham knew that you messed it up, he would get all over you, and it just had to be just a little time, because he was about timing. Eddie Graham was about timing, and he actually made sure the wrestlers had timing. And Dusty Rhodes, no matter what people want to say, he had that timing from Eddie Graham. And you can kind of see when you talk about Championship Wrestling from Florida, you can kind of see when Eddie Graham passes away. Rodney, you can see a territory, you could tell it was him that was the guy that made it, because
he was the one holding everything. He was the foundation for sure.
There was no foundation when he left. Even when Dusty was booking there for a while, Eddie was the guy that had the finishes. He was the one that had the ideals, and he would produce such a great show. And Eddie Graham teaches Bill Watts. Bill Watts goes to Mid-South. He books for the guy right now is
McGirt.
Leroy McGirt.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right? He's booking for Leroy McGirt, and he has now. Remember, he comes from Championship Wrestling from Florida. He starts booking for Leroy McGirt. He learned everything he needed to learn from a man that knew how to do it. Now, Mid-South Wrestling was a little because I think it was Tri-States Championship Wrestling, wasn't it, Rodney?
Right.
as Leroy McGurk. Well, they finally do a split. Leroy McGurk keeps the Mississippi part of it and also keeps the Oklahoma part of it. Bill Watts runs Mississippi. Runs Louisiana. Both territories are still doing well, but Bill Watts, his territory is doing a whole lot better. He actually buys Leroy McGurk out. How important was Mid-South Wrestling, Jack, to the expansion into national television?
It was big because it was a quality product. Watts had the foresight. He wanted to be bigger, and he knew that in order to get there, he had to put out a better product, and he did that. Mid-South is a template for how wrestling shows should be run.
And he didn't do the same show everyone else was doing.
Right.
And that was, I think that was what made Mid-South Wrestling successful. Don't you, Rodney?
Yes, absolutely. Because we talked about it before. There was a lot on television that you wouldn't see anywhere else. And they talk about it a lot, but these mismatches were first of all, they're not interesting at all. They do not keep people's attention. In fact, Georgia was so bad at one point when we were recording, we were using cassette tapes recording the video. This was before video players. We would sit there and we would cut out all the wrestling matches and only leave the interviews. In fact, we've got a drawer full of those cassette tapes here that we could play and that we've set and cut the matches out. They were so bad.
Yeah, because the matches were so boring. They really were. They actually were boring. And that's, as kids, we thought they were boring. And this was 1977, 78, 79. And I actually fell asleep a few times at the TV station while the matches were going on. But you look at Mid-South Wrestling, look at the Rock and Roll Express, Magnum TA, Terry Taylor, the Midnight Express, all the people that came from his territory that eventually would go to TBS, be national stars, and the money they would draw all over. But look at the stuff they learned from Bill Watts, and that helped. Let's be honest, I've learned a lot from Bill Watts.
You got to leave. You can't leave out the Junkyard Dog or the Freebirds. You can't leave them out of that.
Yeah.
And Ted DiBiase.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ted DiBiase, Steve Williams. So many people went from his territory to nationally, and I think that really, you think about it, Jim Duggan goes and becomes a huge star for WWF. So he really did build a lot of stars so Vince McMahon could go national and make millions and even billions of dollars. Another territory, and we're going to run out of time talking about territories, but another territory right there in the Florida area was Southeastern Championship Wrestling. Actually started by the Fields. It was probably started prior to that from other people, but the Fields mainly in the 60s and 70s. Then Ron Fuller bought it in sometime in 1978, maybe 1979. That's another territory, especially that Dothan area. That was, if people talk about, but Dothan, Alabama was drawing 5,000 people every Saturday night. And a lot of people don't realize this, but how well they were doing, even before Ron Fuller, Rodney, and the Fields was doing tremendous business.
Yeah, when it was Gulf Coast, we've talked about it before. Gulf Coast wrestling was huge, absolutely huge, and it spanned from Alabama, the Panhandle, all the way into Mississippi. Sometimes and at one time into Louisiana. That's how far they stretched the fields in the Gulf Coast wrestling.
And when Southeastern come along, they did great. Now, they didn't always do good business. See, now you have to be very careful of the territory days. You have to be very careful because you'll hear the older wrestlers say, oh, we were selling out every week. That was not the truth. That did not. Georgia Championship Wrestling went through bad times and it didn't draw. Southeastern, we were there, went through several bad times while we were there and didn't draw. So it didn't always draw. So no matter what people want to talk about in interviews, we were at Southeastern Wrestling the first time we were there. Man, that place was dead. It was not drawing. We was in Georgia Championship Wrestling from 1972 until 1983. And yes, it did good from like 74 until about 1980. And it just started tanking in 1980. Am I correct, Rodney?
No, it was awful. And, well, we can go through the All the reasons, Kevin Sullivan, and Mark Lewin, and Austin Idol.
And the unspeakable name?
Yes, that too.
Georgia Championship Wrestling was another one of those territories that Jim Barnett took over in 1974. And when we talk about territories, it started out with Tom Ernesto booking for Ann Gunkel, and it finally went into when Jim Barnett came in. He put Bill Watts as the booker to begin with. I don't think him and Bill Watts got along very well. So then they bring in Jerry Jarrett. Jerry Jarrett makes a complete turnaround of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Draws a ton of money in Georgia. And then from there, I think Gary Hart may come back through there. And then I think Tom Ernesto came back and booked it for a while. And then it comes into Ole Anderson. Ole Anderson books it from 1976 to 1980. And I think at that point they brought a couple different bookers in from 1980 to 1983. But Georgia Championship Wrestling, and Jack, you know it, you went to a lot of those matches. That's one of the places you wanted to go wrestle, was Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Yep. Yeah, it was great, man. From a fan standpoint, from somebody that knew that he was going to wrestle one of those days, it was a standard for me.
And it was so sad by 1986, a lot of those places were out of business. Georgia Championship Wrestling went out of business in 1984. Didn't really go out of business. Vince McMahon bought it, and he basically put it out of business because he really didn't run any of the towns. He didn't really run Georgia. But Georgia was a great territory until they started running Ohio, and it killed Georgia pretty bad during that time, because they'd go on TV and that's all they talk about. But the same thing happened in other territories. You take Continental Championship Wrestling. When Knoxville started running, they talked about Knoxville all the time and just forgot that Dothan, Alabama existed, forgot that Birmingham existed, forgot Florence, Alabama, and everything that happened in Knoxville, Tennessee. So, people say, well, why'd I buy a ticket? I might as well drive to Knoxville, Tennessee to watch it. That's the only place anything's ever going to happen. But so many territories, and it would take us all night to talk about all the territories. We're talking 40. We're talking about Don Owen in Portland, Oregon. Did great business for years. Frizz Von Erich, World-Class Championship Wrestling.
Hunks and Amarillo.
And really one of the first territories, Toots Mont and Vince McMahon Sr., they ran the WWWL for years. It was called Capital Sports years ago, but I see that he's asking a question about that. But I think at some point we need to take every territory and kind of break it down: when it started, how it started, and why it failed.
We're leaving out one big one: Jim Crockett Sr., probably as far as I'm concerned, the top promoter ever. Just awesome, absolutely awesome promoter.
Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take in coming up soon. We'll take Championship Wrestling in Florida. We'll look at it. We'll see when it started, who promoted it, and why it did fall. A lot of times people blame Vince McMahon for the fall, but really that is not what happened to the territories. I think Jack said this one time. You said it didn't explode, it imploded.
Yep.
And most territories did do that. It was never Vince McMahon. He did help a little bit. He did kind of help them along, but it wasn't completely Vince McMahon's fault. If you're liking this video, give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to the page, and hit that notification bell. It lets us know that you like what we're doing, and it will notify you every time we put a video on. All right, guys, let's go talk to the insiders, and then we'll finish tonight up. Let's see. There are a lot of people came in. We already said Mike said you had his name right. He did not say, Jack, that he was going to send you any.
We'll talk about that later.
Victor Nash said they should have kept the rule. If you throw somewhere over the top rope, you get disqualified. Jack?
I agree with that.
Rod?
Absolutely. But they've thrown most all rules out.
Kevin Finley said that, so Roy Welch never owned Florida. I don't believe he did. No.
Buddy Fuller did at one time.
Yeah.
And Lester Will.
He did not, because Cowboy Luther owned it first, and then Eddie Graham bought into it, and then Buddy did own parts of Florida, and actually Georgia as well. Richard Hood, Eddie Graham was a wrestling mind. He showed Dusty how to be Dusty. Yes, he did. Daniel Lang, Eddie Graham sent Bob Backlund to Vince Sr. when he wanted an All-American boy to replace his brother, superstar Billy Graham. That's true as well. Michael Barr, what territory was Ox Baker in? Oh, he was in a ton of territories.
All over the place.
A lot of places.
He was in
super nice guy too.
And was funny.
Yes.
He was one funny man. I think he missed his calling. I think he should have been a comedian.
Yeah.
Is there a territory he wasn't in?
That's right. No, I don't think there was.
Yeah, he was in every territory. He was him and the French Angel was the Southeastern tag team champions for a while in Knoxville. Daniel, Eddie Graham actually wanted Steve Kern to be the champion because his dad was. Yes, he did. But Vince did not want Steve Kern, so he wanted Bob Backlund. Mike said that was some good stuff back then. I keep up by buying the magazines back then. That's what you could become a star if you were on the magazines.
Yes.
By just being on the magazines. And that's the reason there have been so many people. And I think that's one reason Southeastern Continental the people wasn't as big stars, because they never on the magazines. They never had the guys show up there and take pictures and stuff.
Yeah, well, my understanding was that the Fullers didn't want the magazines covering them. They wanted to kind of keep a lid on everything for whatever reason. I don't know what that reason was for, but they didn't want to partake with the magazines that often.
I think it's because they had the same finishes in every town. I don't think
probably
people know what they were doing. Michael Barr, Southeastern Championship Wrestling was a great territory and ran for a long time. Yes, it was a great territory. Daniel Lang, you're right. They were both in Florida at the time, and there is a video of them working out together where they were doing very athletic exercises. Victor Nash, Florida Southeastern has a new card in January. Is that the?
I believe that's what. Well, I was going to say that's the one in Dothan, but I think they're actually using the Continental name, so I'm not really sure.
Pat Rose said, "Check your messages."
That's you, Brent.
There.
Pat Rose has got something he needs to say.
Evidently, he does. We'll see what he's got to say.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I've got Bo James up there. I got Ole Anderson's book, Bill Dundee, and then I've got this one with Sputnik Monroe, Mass Mids, and Small Peoples.
Oh.
What it says right there, the early days of Memphis wrestling.
That's a good book, by the way. If you've not read that book is tremendous read. It is a tremendous read. Douglas Taylor on our YouTube channel. My favorite territory was Mario Savoldi's International Championship Wrestling that brought in wrestling stars from Texas, Florida, Mexico. I saw it, all the greats. Yeah, Mario Savoldi was a very nice guy as well. We actually had in 1989, I think it was, or 1988, we were trying to get a working relationship with him. And actually, we had it working. For some reason, it all fell apart. Maybe he went out of business before we could do that. But we were going to bring a lot of his wrestlers to Continental. But that just didn't work out for some reason.
Yeah, I worked for him in 85. I never got to meet him, but I worked for his promotion for a few shows.
You probably met Joe, didn't you, Joe Savoldi?
I believe so. Yeah, Joe was there, I believe.
Great show. Thanks, Rodney, Jack, and Brent. Glenn Allen said Sam. I'm not for sure.
Sam, I am.
Do I?
Sam, I am.
Dr. Philbo Christ said, if memory serves, Dothan was the market I grew up around. Big business through the full years, and then went downhill afterwards. Yes. Yeah, that's
one of the reasons was when the formula was broken, where you had the live TV show there in the afternoon, and then the show that night. It destroyed. This is something that was repeated in just about every market that had its own TV show. It happened. And the fact of the matter is that TV production didn't cost a lot. They could have continued to do it, but they chose to do it like everybody else, consolidate, make one show fits all in it. And in the end, the only really show that remained consistent for years was Jarrett in Memphis. Only one that really survived.
And remember now, the territory did go down under the Fullers too. It was not doing great business when it was sold to David Woods. And most times you do not sell a territory when it's doing great business. So you're going to do it when you're losing money or not doing that well.
And it was going to take a new it was going to have to take a new amount of revenue and resources to be put in because everything had to be updated. Not just because of Vince McMahon, but in television in general, they demanded bigger, better productions, and it's just the way it was.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that went on during that time that we could talk about. Especially, everybody likes to blame David Woods for the territory going down, but it was not David Woods' fault.
No,
it was to a certain extent. He bought a company and didn't put a dime into it, which made no sense. Why would you buy something and never put no money into it? But business was down before he got it. So Douglas Taylor said, I saw guys like Blackjack Mulligan, Abdul Butcher, Dory and Terry Funk, Kevin Sullivan, Bob Backlund, Ivan Putski, Jewel Strongbow, the Purple Haze, and so many others. Great names right there. Well, now Rodney won't like Kevin Sullivan, Douglas, but we'll
Kevin Sullivan prior to working with Mark Lewin was okay.
He was. He really was.
After that, it was he and Mark Lewin that done me in, and then after that, him and Steve Kern finished it off.
Why do you think Wrestling 2 went to the WWF at the time? I think he really believed that they were going to do something with him. Yeah. Man, they just made him like he was a job guy by the time he
horrible.
I mean, they treated him horrible. I don't think he's liked Vince McMahon ever since that. That was just horrible. Richard said, fellas, it was really one promotion back in the day, and that was the NWA. They didn't want to break any antitrust laws, so they broke it up into 3 promotions, the AWA and the WWF. There's a couple of more things about that. Vern Gagne wanted to be a heavyweight champion. They didn't want Vern Gagne to be the heavyweight champion, so he pretty well developed his own company so he could be champion. But it's been done. So there's a couple other stories we could tell you about that. We might in a future episode of what was going on during that time. There was so much going on. Gotta love Ox Baker. Yes, you do. His interviews were so good. There was nobody better. There's a video of Ox Baker on The Price is Right. Yes.
Yeah. That is awesome.
I've seen that.
Glenn Allen said they had disputes over champions that broke. Yes.
We reviewed that when you were on vacation the last time, me and Jack on the World Champions, and we reviewed the part of the reasons that they broke away.
Douglas said, not to mention, I got to see like Les Thatcher, a great wrestler and a great commentator, Dominic DeNucci, and King Curtis.
King Curtis. I love that. Great interview, King Curtis.
Buddy Rogers and Gagne, they had a lot to do. Those 2 guys right there had a lot to do with the WWF and the AWA. Those 2 guys were very instrumental in that happening. Michael Barr, remember watching that years ago. Paul Ante, Frank Tunney, and the nephew Jack had a good promotion in Toronto. Yep. Oh man, that was tremendous. Yep. I love seeing their stuff. If you get to watch their stuff online.